Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, this is happening right now. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about massive food inflation that's going on in the UK and all over the world, really. And ultimately, where is that going? Is it going to get better or worse? And what does it have to do with Bible prophecy? So let's start with this article right here. This is from CNBC. It says the UK government says it is meeting with food bosses over high prices, but denies it will impose caps, meaning price caps. And here we read, it says the UK government said it is engaging with the food sector amid attempts to reduce the inflation-driven strain on British households. The government is not considering imposing price caps. This is a government spokesperson that told CNBC by email. So here we have our first official government denial. We had this government spokesperson saying the government is not considering imposing price caps. So let me translate that for you if you don't understand government speak. That means the government is imposing price caps. so they may say that today. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, the next day, a week from now, but at some point they'll say, yep, we're imposing price caps, and that was the plan the whole time. Why did you think otherwise? And if you say, well, you said you weren't even considering it, they'll go, we didn't say that. This is the way it works, guys. So I'm sure many of you that are familiar with this know that that's the way it works. But this says the government is not considering imposing price caps. Any scheme to help bring down food prices for consumers would be voluntary. Now, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the United States, the word scheme is usually associated with something secret and nefarious and sinister. So probably doesn't mean that in the UK in the sense that it's being used by this government spokesperson, but I applaud them for using the proper use because that's what the government does, is scheme. So this says it comes as Britain's struggle with food and non-alcoholic beverage inflation at more than 4-decade highs of 19%. Now, for some people in Venezuela, Turkey, Zimbabwe, you may say, hey, 19% year over year inflation, I'll take that any day. They probably thought, well, 19% per hour. No, I'll take that. But again, this is an official government statistic. We know it's much, much higher than 19% year over year. If you're in the UK, leave your comments below. Let me know what the real figure is. What are you experiencing when you go to the store to buy food? I'm sure it's a lot more expensive this year than it was last year, a lot more than a 19% increase. But here we have this next article. This is from Metro. It says, Rishi Sunak faces backlash over 1970s style price caps at supermarkets. Well, I thought that they weren't even considering it, right? That's what the official government spokesperson just said. They weren't even considering price caps. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that all of this, we foretold all of this a year ago. We were saying food inflation is coming, then they're going to impose price caps. That's what they usually do, which is going to then lead to shortages. And the government's just going to keep getting involved deeper and deeper and messing up the free market, making it even worse, taking a bad situation, making it worse. And it's a bad situation because the government created it that way to begin with. So it says here, the government's plans to encourage supermarkets to impose voluntary price caps on basic foods has been met with heavy criticism. So the government's plans, I thought they weren't even considering. That's what we just read in the same story. Let's see. Let me look at this. This is from May 29th. Previous story, May 29th. The government is not considering. Here we have the government's plans. So this is what they do to us, guys. They tell us one thing, and then this is why gaslighting has been one of the big words of the last couple of years. It's because this is what they're doing to us. It says Rishi Sunak is understood to be drawing up proposals asking retailers to limit the amount shoppers pay for essential items such as bread and milk to help with the cost of living crisis. But the UK's major supermarkets condemn the idea, while at least 2 cabinet ministers are also said to oppose the policy. Yes, because it will ultimately lead to shortages. There's no way you can simply say the price needs to be capped at this. Well, if no one can afford to produce those products at a profit, then they won't, which means that you will have shortages. So people won't have to worry about paying 19% or whatever it is. Again, leave your comments below. 50% more, 100% more than you paid a year ago, because you won't be able to pay anything for a product that is not available, which is what's going to happen if they impose their price caps. So this says Andrew Opie, Director of Food and Sustainability at the BRC, which is the British Retail Consortium, said this will not make a jot of difference to prices. As commodity prices drop, many of the costs keeping inflation high are now arising from the muddle of new regulation coming from the government. Surprise, surprise. Rather than recreating 1970s style price controls, the government should focus on cutting red tape so that resources can be directed to keeping prices as low as possible. One cabinet minister said you can't interfere in markets because it doesn't work in this day and age. Well, let's take a time out there. It's never worked. It doesn't matter what day and age we're talking about. This type of thing was instituted back in ancient Rome. I mean, go read your history books. They had runaway hyperinflation because they debased their currency as well in order to fight the endless foreign wars and to have all the social programs and bread and circuses. And then prices obviously went out of control, so they instituted these wage and price controls. I believe it was Diocletian that did that. And it led to shortages. So it doesn't matter what day and age you're talking about, whether it was then, the 1970s, today, the outcome is the same. You mess with the free market, you create problems. It says they told the Telegraph there's an international market for wheat, and it's quite expensive after what's happened in Ukraine. If you drive down the price of bread, it can be sold elsewhere. We live in global markets, and it's very different to what happened in the 1970s and after the war. In other words, if you artificially lower the price of bread, it'll get sold elsewhere, not in the UK, which means you're going to have a shortage of bread in the UK. Surprise, surprise. So again, what is the common denominator we're seeing here? We're seeing, what is causing this? Because we've talked about this in the past, especially when it comes to fresh vegetables in the UK. You had greenhouses that were responsible for a large percentage of those, and they were very energy intensive. Energy prices went up as greenhouses shut down, or they could only afford to produce at very, very expensive price levels. Well, we've seen energy prices start to go down. So why are we having these problems? Well, we're having these problems, one, because of this fiat currency that's been pumped out by all these governments as part of the pandemic response, which has led to inflation, price inflation. But we're also seeing the energy policies. And even though energy is down right now and it was a mild winter in Europe, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about that in a future video, because I think things are going to get bad again come this winter. But it's government policies. No matter which way you look, it's government policies causing these problems. And that leads us right into what's going on here. This is from the Irish Times. It says, cull of Ireland's dairy cattle for climate targets should be voluntary, farmers say. Says any plan to cull Ireland's dairy herd must be voluntary, the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association has warned. Pat McCormick told News Talk Breakfast that if there is to be a scheme, here we go with the government schemes again, it needs to be a voluntary scheme. And of course, guys, this is the issue. It's all these government schemes that are causing these problems. It's not, yes, the war in Ukraine has an impact, no doubt about it. The weather has an impact. There are all sorts of variables all over the world impacting food supply, impacting the supply chain. But the biggest factor is government policies in relation to energy, government policies in relation to the currency involved, government policies in relation to climate targets and trying to eliminate our food supply. And this is a prime example. It says up to 65,000 dairy cows a year could be culled as the government moves to bring the agriculture sector in line with climate targets, according to a report by the Irish Independent. And it's not just our cows they're trying to eliminate. Let's look at this. This is from Zero Hedge. From last month, it says rice is now killing the planet, apparently. So now rice is under attack. So we read here, it says, now it is firmly ensconced among the, let me turn that off. Now it is firmly ensconced among the climate change cult that eating meat is killing the planet and you must eat the bugs. The same people have a new target, rice. So let's, well, I just made that really big. Let me see. Okay, there we go. It says rice is to blame for around 10% of global emissions of methane, a gas that over 2 decades traps about 80 times as much heat as carbon dioxide. Scientists say that if the world wants to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, rice cannot be ignored. Don't forget that rice cannot be ignored. This says the UN Food and Agriculture Organization notes that rice is one of the most important staple foods in the world. Over 50% of the world population depends on rice for about 80% of its food requirements. About 95% of the global output of rice is produced and consumed in developing countries. What is this really about? And here we have this tweet. It says, banning rice would kill tens of millions of innocent people. I'm starting to think it's never been about saving the planet. And it's not, guys. And we haven't even talked about the Netherlands and what they're doing in the Netherlands, attacking farmers, trying to shut down farms, buy out farms, prohibit farming. And the Netherlands, while we may think of it as a small country landmass-wise, is one of the leading exporters of food products in the world. So this is going to have a significant impact on the global food supply as well. But when we talk about policies that the government's pushing like this, what do we expect to see but headlines like this? Global rice shortage is set to be the biggest in 20 years. So here we have, what do we expect? It says from China to the US to the European Union, rice production is falling and driving up prices for more than 3.5 billion people across the globe, particularly in the Asia Pacific, which consumes 90% of the world's rice. So we're seeing massive food inflation. Again, there's a number of reasons for this. The war in Ukraine is one, but it's not the primary reason. It's not the only reason. We've seen weather-related issues. Again, we've seen the government pandemic response over the last 3 years has caused the global supply chain to break in many ways. They've printed currency, spent money, and broken the system and caused this massive inflation. And it's caused all these distortions in the free market. And what it means is we have elevated food prices. We talked about this much of last year, that we would be seeing this year, and that's what we're seeing. That's exactly what we're seeing. Or what does this mean? What did we say then? Well, it doesn't mean that if you're in the United States, there's no food in the grocery store. It just means the food in that grocery store is much more expensive. But if you live in some countries around the world, some developing countries, it does mean the food is not on the store shelf. because when you have shortages of these supplies, the economically powerful nations buy that food up. They can bid higher for it. And that means that less is available for those countries that are not economically powerful enough to bid on and are dependent on imports, food imports, in order to survive. So we're going to see, unfortunately, famines in some parts of the world in 2023 as a direct result of these government policies. And if they keep pushing forward with these policies, as we're seeing in the Netherlands, this new attack on rice, it's only going to get worse. And again, just as that tweet said, I think this is about something more than what they say it is. There's a different agenda at play here. We can speculate all day as to what that is. But I also ran across this article here, which I found very interesting. It says, olive oil prices soar as top producer plagued with drought. Spain's severe drought and parched soils have sent olive oil prices to levels not seen in more than a decade. The surge in olive oil prices, along with fresh produce, is exacerbating already high food prices as the Northern Hemisphere summer starts in less than a month. Data from Bloomberg shows that Spanish extra virgin olive oil prices have jumped 200% since 2020, the highest level since 2010. Now, why does that stand out? I mean, olive oil, the world isn't going to starve if olive oil doubles in price. But what made me, when I saw that headline, I immediately thought of Revelation chapter 6, verses 5 through 6. Here we read about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, it's more known by, but it says, when the Lamb broke the third seal, I heard the third living being say, come. I looked up and I saw a black horse, and its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice from among the four living beings say, a loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's pay. And don't waste the olive oil and the wine. So again, what does this mean? This is pointing to a future hyperinflation of the food supply. You could say a massive famine, but it's saying that a day's wages will barely buy enough to feed one person. But luxury items like olive oil and wine will be freely available. In other words, hyperinflation really attacks those at the lower rungs of the economic spectrum, just as we're talking about now. But does that mean that we are on the cusp of seeing this fulfilled? Maybe. We could be very close to this. This takes place during the tribulation, but I believe in the opening part of the tribulation. So we could be close to that. We could be seeing that, but I think it's probably more likely that we're seeing something like what Jesus talked about in Matthew 24. So this is verses 4 through 8 here. The disciples have come to Jesus and they've said, what are the signs of your coming, the end of the age? You're coming to establish your kingdom on earth. And this is what Jesus says. He says, don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah. They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world, but all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. So we're on the cusp of seeing a global famine, which at the very least is one of the birth pains that Jesus spoke about. We could be nearing the beginning of the tribulation period, and if that's the case, then the rapture would be even closer than that, because I believe the rapture of the church takes place before the tribulation period. But given all the other events that would probably have to happen, it's more likely that this is simply a birth pain, one of the birth pains that Jesus spoke about. But guys, again, we've talked about this in the past. Sock away some extra food. If you live in the United Kingdom, the United States, some of these Western nations, some of the economically powerful nations, it's a good idea to buy some extra canned food now because it'll cost you a lot less today than it will a year from now. But do what you can as well to conserve resources in order to take care of your neighbors, your community, your local food pantry, and charities that will be relying on you and me to be able to feed some of the people that are going to be suffering from the famine as a result of these policies. And again, we see so many of these policies. We talked last week about some of the economic policies that are being enacted. And at this point, you just can't believe this is incompetence and they don't know what they're doing. I believe certainly on some level, it depends on the individual, it can be, but there is obviously some plan here to either eliminate people or make people dependent upon the government in order to control them based on the food supply, based on banking and currency transactions. And this is just the latest bit. Now they're attacking rice. Again, rice and cows. Rice and cows have been around for thousands of years. And yet now all of a sudden it's a crisis and we need to eliminate the rice and the cows. I'm not buying it. And I hope you aren't either. But again, all of this is a sign of the times in which we live. Jesus said famine would be a birth pain. We see so many more of those birth pains. We see the nation of Israel back in the land of Israel. We see the Jewish people in control of Jerusalem once again. We see the gospel being preached around the world. We hear of calls for global government. We see all the technology coming in place to fulfill Revelation 11, Revelation 13, the mark of the beast system coming into play, the Gog of Magog alliance forming. Guys, all of these different signs are showing up. And in Matthew 24, which we just read, and Mark 13, Luke 21, all of those passages, Jesus said, when you see all these things, he said, when you begin to see these things, look up, your salvation draws near. So while this may sound like bad news, I realize the governments all around the world are really they've declared war on people, pure and simple. And that's not a good thing. None of us enjoy that. It's bad news. But the good news is that all these signs indicate our salvation draws near. Jesus said, when those things happen, look up. Meaning he's coming back soon, guys. He is coming back soon. One day, Jesus will return and there will be justice and tranquility on this earth. All these bad things will go away. All the bad news will go away. That's where we should place our hope for the future, is in Jesus Christ, because he will not let us down, guys. So I hope you've done that. If you haven't done that, hope that you will invite Jesus into your life today. And if you do, I know that you will get a peace that surpasses all understanding, and you'll be able to read news like this and it just roll right past you. So guys, leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. Again, 19% food inflation in the UK. I think that's really, I think that's a fake number the government put out. Very low. It's way higher than that. I know it's higher than that when I go to the store. There are products that I know 3 years ago when I bought on the shelf, and today it's 100% up from 3 years ago. And even 19% year over year for 3 years doesn't add up to 100% yet. So they're not giving us the real figures. So let me know what you think the real figures are, what you're experiencing in the grocery store. Guys, put your hope and faith and trust in Jesus Christ and Jesus alone. Again, let me know what you think. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And God willing, I will see you on Friday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.